Be advised, the opinions and views of the hosts and guests do not reflect those of the station.
You are what you watch.
Hello, good evening. My name is Tambuatco and welcome to our program. Now, in the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of turbulence that's been going on, not necessarily just here, but all around the world. It's interesting how the countries in the Middle East are all erupting with what they call rebellions. Most people here in the Philippines call it a repetition, or what they call the business model, or what they call the rebellion model, being people power. Either way, it's the fall of dictators, and that's the way it happens. It's interesting to see how people can stay in power for 3-4 decades and then be taken down by what you call mob rule. Now, you may want to call it something else. Either way, in the Philippines, we called it people power in 1986. Now, current events in our country, we all know about the untimely, or how do you say, the demise of General Reyes. And everybody feels my condolences to the family. But a lot of questions are being asked. Exactly, he's called hero or plunderer. Either way, the Senate investigations keep going. And maybe that's all for the good. I'd like to stress on that issue, basically concerning the armed forces of the Philippines. Not necessarily the National Police Commission, but stay with the armed forces, exactly where they are, where they're going, why, how, and what not. I wrote a column in Opinion, it'll come out next week, but I wanted to wait the first 2 weeks after the untimely demise of General Reyes. My title was Hero or Plunderer. I leave it to the viewer, the reader, and the listener to make that position for yourselves, because I too have a lot of questions. We will try to answer some of these questions, as well as all of these investigations that are ongoing with the Senate. So, for this event for tonight, we have, very timely, we have Major Enrico Gil Ileto, who is with the Public Affairs Office of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. With us to sit in with us, to co-host with me, we have Ms. Rachel Ann Panaliki, and who is with NC-PAG of the University of the Philippines, a master's student, and also quite knowledgeable in her studies and research with the reforms of what we call the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Thank you very much for being on the show. Let's go straight to the point. Dire-diretso nyo natin para maganda ang bakbakan ngayong gabi, no? Major, anong storya talaga ng AFP ngayon, ng Armed Forces natin, pagdating sa moral ng mga sundalo? Kasi ang daming nga lumalabas na batikos sa Armed Forces. It sounds a little heavy. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'd like to introduce the show by saying when the Senate came back to reinvestigate last Friday, no less than the Senate President Enrile, he gave an opening speech and said that this is not the makings of a Senate that is attacking the institution, because the institution has to be preserved, has to be respected, and without this institution, we are all, well, it's going to be tyranny, chaos. We need the armed forces. We are not trying to wreck it, as he says, but investigations need to go on as oversight to find out what's going on. Kamusta po ang armed forces ngayon dito sa mga investigasyon ng Senado?
First and foremost, we would like to say that everything that's coming out in the Senate sa investigasyon ay matagal na po nangyari yun.
Matagal na nga, 2002,
2002 hanggang
2003, 2004.
Nung time ni Colonel Rabusa, allegedly. And the AFP has reformed itself, no? Ever since 2005, as early as 2004.
Are you telling me that the armed forces na-identify na yung mga issues na mga ganito pinag-uusapan sa Senado noon pa?
Napapag-usapan na rin po. And dun sa tanong mo kanina, Harry,
Opo, opo.
about the
I hope you don't mind my intro, no? Yung ganon. Maganda yung diretsuhan eh.
yeah, about the morale of the soldiers. First and foremost, yung sweldo po namin ay next year will be doubled 4 years before.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yes.
That's very good.
Third tranche na kami ngayong July. Ibig sabihin, 3 beses na sa 3 sunod-sunod na taon na tumataas yung aming
It's about
sweldo.
time, no?
And yes, and next year,
Yes.
100% doble na po yung sweldo namin.
Whose administration introduced that?
Under
Anong
PGMA.
Under GMA.
Opo.
Ah, okay.
And until now, nagko-continue pa rin siya. At ang ating Chief of Staff, si General David po, he gave an instruction to all the unit commanders and to tell to the soldiers na we should be aware of what's happening, especially dyan sa Senate. Although, syempre, ang sabi natin sa ating mga sundalo, hindi kayo pwedeng makialam dyan, but we should be aware of what's happening, ano yung pinag-uusapan doon.
Nakakabuti kaya? O nakakasama?
Kasi kung hindi natin dialo yun, parang, di ba, parang mas mahirap dun sa isang sundalo na, hindi ko alam kung ano nangyayari. That is why we constantly explain to the soldiers yung kung ano man yung pinag-uusapan doon. And kasama sa ating mga pakikipag-usap sa kanya, yung mga reforms na nangyari sa ating armed forces since 2005, na kung saan binabanggit natin palagi, even sa public, na everything that's been going out in the Senate inquiry has long been gone. Almost everything na binabanggit ng
I
G6.
think David and some other generals tried to explain that in the Senate, but I don't think it was conveyed well. Hindi parang kulang sa
masyado.
pag-iintindi. Kasi
Yeah.
kung ako nanonood ako, ngayon ko lang na-realize, number one, na napag-usapan nyo na pala yan, 205 pa yan. And number two, even the salaries. There's no better way to perk up the morale.
Definitely po.
Definitely pay scale kasi. Pero, ang masama lang dyan, ang pinag-uusapan, milyon-milyon ang ginagastos ng mga general na korap.
Yeah.
Pero kaawa-awa naman yung mga foot soldier natin, delikado na sila, peligroso na ang trabaho, nababaril na, at ang bilis mamigay ng medal, pero pagdating sa pera, mukhang mahigpit. Pero kung gastusin,
Yeah.
I mean, my gosh,
That is
multiple
why
houses. No?
kailangan
Grabe.
nating malaman. Kami ay...
You must hate Rabusa, ha? I mean, Rabusa. You must hate Carlos Garcia
We will-
and Limot.
Opo.
Ligot.
Ligot.
I purposely call him Limot because of Jinggoy, no?
Inaantay po namin yung magiging resulta ng investigation. And talagang sabi nga namin sa Congress, please medyo hasten up natin yung investigation. So that, because the longer that you drag the investigation, medyo, syempre, ang AFP ang kahit pa paano po inaapektuhan dito.
Naapektuhan as an
Kaya
institution.
as early as possible, we'd like to find out ano ba talaga ang nangyari doon sa mga lumalabas sa investigation.
Ikaw, Rachel, anong base mo dyan sa mga investigasyon nangyayari? Kasi you studied the AFP, you've studied governance, you came from no less than the School of National Governance. Anong base mo dyan sa mga Senado at ang pagtatama sa AFP?
Well, kasi nagkakaroon tayo ng conversion of funds kasi according to a professor of the UPNC PAG na hindi ko na naabutan. Si Bongko Din, a former
Yes, she
DBM
passed
secretary.
away, yeah.
It's a very good professor. Sabi niya kasi, what are these opportunities for corruption? Number one, of course, merong delays in
Yun.
funds availability. So kung ang armed forces, kunwari kailangan na naming mag-operate ngayon, kaso walang pera. But your mandate and mission is this. So how are you going to go about that without you having the money? So that will be an opportunity for corruption.
So, systemic lang ang issue, ang problema is what you're saying. It's, you mean the opportunity of corruption was just brought about because of the poor systems and controls. But
Yeah.
the armed forces of the Philippines, correct me if I'm wrong, you're a man of discipline. And military is, everything is discipline. Surely systems like this should have been corrected by the upper management, or what you would say the officers of the institution. And yet, instead of auditing themselves, they turned around and took advantage of the loopholes. Iyan ba kiniinis ng mga nanonood na sundalo? Take yourself, for example, Major. you are seeing millions. These are not, we're not talking 1 million. Mayroon pa pabaon, 50 million. And in a period of 2 years, Ligot or Limot, which is perfectly known because that's the proper name for him, so it seems, and the wife, Mrs. Reyes, flew abroad for 44 times at the expense of the armed forces. Hindi kaya parang nakakainis yan.
Well, ang masasabi po namin dyan is that, syempre, Senate investigation po. Yung mga sundalo natin, mag-aantay lang po yan ng magiging resulta ng investigation. Pero kung maalala po natin yung statement ni General De Leon, siya po
Yes.
yung naging
Please reiterate.
naging XA, yung executive assistant ni General Simato.
Yeah,
Sinabi po niya na he did indeed receive the 10 million. But sabi niya, ginastos niya yun sa tamang paraan at wala siyang binulsa doon. Ibig sabihin, ang sabi nga rin ni General Simato, it was the system that time
But you're
na,
not subject to audit, so it's very hard to prove that. You're not subject to audit.
Oo, pero well, hindi ko alam yung I don't know the specifics nung pag-uusap nila ni Colonel Rabusha that time, but let me say again that based on the findings ng Feliciano Commission, na find out natin na yung sistema noon is really medyo alanganin yung ating mga disbursing officers, mga finance officers.
Is it the fault of the institution, meaning the AFP, or is it the fault of Congress kasi kulang sa itemization? Is it the civilian government? Is it the civilians' fault? Or is the system that was in place?
Yun po ang gusto naming malaman din sa
Even the AFP is trying to find that out. So that's interesting.
And right now, yung system na naka-in-place sa AFP on the disbursement of funds is that before yung J6, it's just only one. Siya yung tatanggap ng pera, siya yung magmamanage, siya yung
We learned that in
mag-fiscalize,
the investigation. Hindi na eh.
manage, and siya yung mag-audit, siya yung mag-account sa kanyang sarili. But right now, there's 4 separate offices to do
To disburse the
independent auditing, accounting, fiscalizing. Kung kaya't mas merong check and balance ngayon.
Ikaw, Rachel, based on your studies, you think the armed forces already are maayos na yung sistema nila within? Kasi pinag-aralan mo yan di ba?
Within,
Sa institution nila, tama bang ginagawa nila ngayon? O marami pa rin loopholes? Nababasa
marami pa ring loopholes. Wala namang perfect wala namang perfect institution eh. Lahat 'yan na dumadaan sa series of changes. Pero for the benefit of the viewers, I might as well as the Major Ileto, can you please explain kasi dati kasi the Office of the Deputy Chief of Staff for Controllership, J6 is one of the powerful staff of the Chief of Staff, di ba? So, ano ang meron tayo noon with regards to finances and budget at ano ang meron tayo ngayon? So that the viewers will know
Anong iniba nyo?
kung anong reforms na ang ibinigay nyo. Di ba sabi mo kanina sa akin when we were talking, meron ng 4 na offices na
That disburse it?
Yeah, na
nag-open na yan.
Yeah. Can you please explain
Siguro
to the
ang masasabi ko, short phrase lang, more
Yeah.
check and balance.
More check and balance.
balance.
So more transparency?
More transparency because 4 na siya, independent siya, and imposible na mag-usap pa yung 4 na independent offices. Accounting office, civilian employee. Yung
civilian ba?
Civilian.
Employee, civilian
Yung
ang
chief ng
accounting
accounting.
niya.
Opo. And then yung resource management, yung management and fiscal office, and then yung internal auditor is
Your internal auditor is independent or part of the AFP?
it's part of the AFP pa rin po.
General.
It's
But are they
independent
subject to
man
the
by-
discipline? Kasi ang military, alam ko,
Subject to
you
military
don't
discipline.
question. You question later, but you follow first.
But it doesn't mean you can do anything na hindi siya allowed ng batas. And meron kami military
Where does
discipline.
that begin? When does that end? Yan. Maganda yung point na yan. Just very quickly.
Well,
Because you're trained to follow first and question
you
later.
You can report any hindi magandang nangyayari, or if you think there's a corruption na nangyayari. We have the Inspector General in all units of the AFP.
An Inspector General.
Inspector General. Sila po ang nag-iimbestiga ng lahat ng corruption. At marami ng sundalo po na nakasuhan dito. At marami
really?
ng sundalo na nakakulong na discharge sa serbisyo
Kasi sa nakawan.
dahil sa nakawanan nila.
Opo. Inspector
Hindi lang
General.
siguro nababalita. o-
Hindi nga. So maybe, alam mo, maganda yung narito nga kayo sa harap ng television para makita ng viewer. No? there are other parts or points of views that the armed forces need to convey to the public so that there be an appreciation of how the institution works. Hindi yung naririnig lang natin sa investigasyon sa radyo, because it's live on air. And really, it's very depressing. I worry, as a civilian, I worry that the institution might crumble. And that institution is in place to protect us, the very citizens.
Yeah. But rest assured po, yung inyong sundalo ay matatag. It has reformed to a professional organization. At alam niya kung ano yung nangyayari. Sabi natin sa sundalo at sinasabi rin nila, we will not be allowed to be affected by anything. Even yung investigation.
We will not be politicized.
We will not be politicized at we will continue with doing, gagampanan pa rin namin yung aming tungkulin na protektahan ang ating mga kababayan.
So, in your studies as well, Rachel, nakita mo yung mga sistema ng AFP and you already see, but you're still questioning some reforms.
Yes, particularly the AFP grievance system. For example, if I'm a junior officer or an enlisted personnel, tapos nakita ko that may anomalies ang aking higher officer, kanino ko siya dadalhin? Kanino ko ilalabas itong
Good
grievance nito, di ba? The grievance mechanism in the armed forces is very important kasi diyan nagsisimula lahat eh. Remember the case of Lieutenant Senior grade Gadian?
Okay.
The female officer, I think
yes,
the female officer.
Navy yun, di ba?
My question is that, bakit mas pinili niya na sa media lumabas kesa ibigay ang grievance dito sa loob mismo, internal?
Good point.
Diba?
Yun din ang tanong namin noon, Harry at saka Rachel. That time, we gave her all the chance to
You
air.
did. I remember you went on TV. I remember the military top brass went on.
We went on TV and we
You were trying to
communicated
gag
with
her. Yeah.
we communicated with her. Please tell us because we didn't know during that time kung ano ba yung mga
Kung anong palalabasin niya.
anong sinasabi niya and we don't know kung ano ba talaga yung gusto niyang sabihin sa public.
Where did that go anyway? Do you remember how did that end? Or it hasn't ended, it's still pending?
It's still pending. I think it's still pending eh. Ang pinaka dapat kong bigyan ng emphasis siguro dito is the grievance system eh. Kasi ang nangyayari kasi, ang mga sundalo natin, they resort to media na eh. Imbis na they sasabihin nila sa senior officer na, sir, this is my problem, these are our problems, pero hindi nila masabi. Parang yung ginawa ni Lieutenant Senior Grade Gadian is desperate act na sa media na ako lalabas instead of the internal. So, sino ba ang nag-handle ng AFP grievance system natin?
The
Diba?
grievance system is the chain of command ng AFP. Meaning if you're in the
Your
squad,
immediate officer.
not really po officer kasi if you're down to the squad level, meron kang squad leader, meron kang platoon sergeant, meron kang platoon leader.
May hierarchy eh.
Hierarchy siya eh. And meaning you
Kung
have
kalaban mo yung immediate boss
you can
mo.
jump to the next level.
Jump to the next.
Oo, kung
Kung
wala kang
kasabot
magalang
niya yung,
choice.
kasabot niya yun.
Sa isang company, for example, sa isang infantry company, meron siyang first sergeant. Siya yung nagre-represent ng buong enlisted personnel ng company na yon. Company meaning yung isang unit ng mga sundalo. And he can speak in behalf of that soldier. Pwede niyang i-air dun sa kasama niyang enlisted man na pinaka-senior dun sa unit niya. Nang sa ganun siya ay magpapadala dun sa taas ng kanyang grievance.
I see.
Kaya maraming paraan po, maraming paraan. And let me just mention na yung grievance system is separate from pagka meron ka ng kaso about violations ng military justice system, alleged corruption. Hindi na po sa military, sa grievance system yon. Kakasuhan ka na po ng Inspector General. So, two different parts na gusto nating i-clear na grievance system and yung kapag anomalies na about funds.
So it's not necessarily, it's not 100%, but it's working.
It's working. It's working.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's interesting to note, alam mo, I always say right before when you hear the opening billboard of this show, you are what you watch. It pertains to exactly the same way when you say you are what you read and you are what you hear. Because information that comes to you is the only way that you will make proper decisions, proper analysis, and for your future decisions to make for the betterment of your life and community. Having Major Relato here explaining these issues helps us understand exactly where the armed forces is going, to help and better appreciate this institution that we require to work for us. Now stay with us. When we get back, we'll try to purge more of these questions as we go along. Hello, my name is Harry Tambuatco. Here on to our second segment. Our guest, we have Major Enrico Gil Ileto from the Public Affairs Office of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. We also have co-host with us Rachel Ann Panaliki, who is with the NCPAG, that's the National College of Administration.
Public Administration and Governance.
Administration and Governance, okay, of the University of the Philippines, a master's student, and a person who has gone out of her way to study the armed forces and the systems so that we can help better interview about this topic. Let's go back, Major. How does the system work when it comes to the grievances? How you were explaining to me during the break. Kasi pag sundalo, hindi naman pwedeng lahat pupunta ng media. Tama ka naman, kundi tyranny yan, chaos yan. Miski civilian, civilian, di ba? Sabihin natin lahat ng farmers, halika dito, fisherman, sabihin mo nga kung anong galit mo. Di siyempre, gutom ako kasi sa gobyerno nito, lahat na pagbibintangan eh. Ang sundalo, may ethics, may specific ethics that you have to follow. Please explain that part.
We have a specific guidelines sa lahat ng sundalo na you can not just approach anybody from the media or even go to on public and sabihin mo na galito ko sa ganito, hindi ako satisfied. Because sundalo ka eh. You're supposed to protect the citizens. And you can just imagine, lahat ng sundalo pupunta sa TV at sasabihin niya na kulang yung sweldo ko. Hindi ako satisfied sa serbisyo ko. That will be medyo magiging alanganin yung ating institution yan. And being the institution na siyang nagpoprotekta sa ating mga mamamayan. At kung kaya't ang isang sundalo expected to follow orders, although he's...
the Code of Standards.
May
It's OSPA eh. It's the Office of the
Ethical Standards.
Office of the Ethical Standards.
Public Accountability, if I'm not wrong. It's OSPA, di ba?
Meaning, what does that mean? It's a system of how grievances
Yes.
or how you control
Meaning,
yourself.
ang sabi nung guideline na yon, follow the chain of command.
Okay.
And then follow the grievance system kung
Right.
meron kang gustong sabihin. Merong tamang forum na pwedeng paratingan ng gusto mong iparating sa higher-ups.
Ikaw, Rachel, may comments ka doon? Tingin mo kinukulang yon?
At tingin ko dun sila sa grievance system nagkukulang eh. Kasi yung ibang sundalo, they'd rather keep their grievances sa sarili lang nila eh. Kasi ayaw na nilang i-elevate eh. So ayaw na nila
Kaya
ng gulo
nangyari
eh.
kay Trillanes, di ba? Yung
Yeah.
lumabas sila.
So desperate na sila eh.
Di ba yung Oakwood, ang kinureklamo lang nila, yung mga botas nila na butas-butas. Tandaan mo yun?
Yeah.
Parang ganun lang, hindi naman talaga against the government yun. I remember it was against the system. So, they should not go to media. So the media is becoming more of a problem.
Not really po. Not really. The media is our partner. Partner ng AFM Media, siyempre. At we learned our lesson dun sa nangyari sa Oakwood incident.
Yes.
And lahat ng...
Followed by the Peninsula incident.
yes, lahat ng mga ipinalabas nila doon, which was also taken by the Feliciano Commission, ay kagad-agad ay inaksyonan natin. To include yung allegedly yung combat boots na sira na, mag-ooperate, pupunta sa bundok yung sundalo ng butas-butas. Right now, if you go to the Philippine Army, you can exchange any part of your uniform at right there and then papalitan siya.
Ito yung mga hindi naririnig ng publiko eh. We don't know this as civilians. and we only see the Senate investigations currently hitting the limelight on the alleged corruption of this guy named Rabusa and Carlos Garcia. Let's go back to that. So the military, ang ginagawa niya, wait and see. Prove it, great.
Hindi lang po yan.
Incarcerate if necessary.
Yeah.
What do you
May-
mean, hindi lang po yan?
May specific instructions po si General David na ang sabi niya, anybody who knows about what happened during that time is free to come out and...
You're supportive to the Senate.
Yes, sir. Sabi niya, pumunta kayo sa Senate. Pero syempre, magpapaalam muna. Sir, I would like
Bakit
to...
walang lumalapit? Hindi naman pwede these guys were able to just do this on their own. I mean, ang pabaon system, obviously, parang it dates back, way back
Yes.
Macapagal, way back Garcia, parang ganun eh.
That what we would like to
Since
find
time
out kung
immemorial.
bakit nangyari yun. Siguro kung totoo man or... Depende
Ikaw,
sa
what do you
magiging
think? Do you
resulta.
think it's real? Parang fantastic, ano?
I don't know. I was just a lieutenant during that time and syempre nasa bundok tayo noon. Ano ba, ang focus ng mga nasa baba is job, work, and accomplishment ng mission po.
So I'm sure it shocks the foot soldier as well. You're all shocked about what's going on.
Hindi ko naman po siguro madedeny yun. Hindi ko madedeny na sabihin ko na hindi sila na-apektuhan. Kahit pa paano po,
So do
syempre...
you think that investigations should just continue, let the chips fall where they may? You agree with that? Let
Yes.
it go. Tuloy
Definitely,
nila.
at kailangan, kung totoo man na ganun kalaki yung...
One sensitive question.
Yeah.
Trillanes, what was his rank in the military?
I think he was a lieutenant.
Okay, a
general,
lieutenant colonel, right?
Senior grade.
Senior grade, okay.
Like a captain.
A captain.
Captain sa Philippine Army, meaning...
Captain Philippine Army, but senior grade lieutenant.
Yes.
He campaigns, he goes to prison, he campaigns, he becomes a senator, a Philippine senator. He sits down there, and now in front of him in the inquiry is no less than the generals that he had to serve.
Yeah.
Was that rude of Trillanes being the senator? How was that viewed by the AFP?
Well,
Too
mahirap-
sensitive?
Too sensitive siguro.
Kasi
po.
sinasagot siya eh.
Yeah.
Di ba? You're not allowed to talk. Tama nga naman.
Well,
You know, pag cabinet meeting o Senate or congressional hearing, you're not allowed to talk unless you're addressed or questioned. Correct me if I'm wrong. Di ba? Ganun dapat na sistema eh. Ayaw ni Reyes yun eh.
Yeah.
So, mali sino doon? Si Trillanes o si Reyes?
I don't know.
Ikaw, anong base mo dyan sa systems nila of ethics? Di ba may ano sila, may code, may
Siguro,
standard sila eh.
It will be up to the Senate to say kung tama ba yung nangyari doon. Ano masasabi na?
No, but in this case, while it's still going on, I remember one of the last instances where we saw General Reyes in front of the Senate was
Pero, syempre,
kini-question
anybody-
siya, sinabihan siya ni
anybody
Trillanes
would
eh.
like to
No,
speak.
you're not allowed to speak. Ginanon ni Trillanes yan eh.
But syempre, anybody who would like to speak would like to be given the same opportunity with the others. No? Saying, kung gusto niya mag-air sana, hayaan natin mag-air kung ano man yung gusto niya sabihin.
Is Trillanes a good example towards the military? Is he a hero to the military because he's become a Philippine senator?
Depende na po yan kung paano natin gauge yung pagiging hero niya.
Well, senators, 200 million a year on pork barrel alone. And how many millions per month? No, because the reason I asked that is in line basically with the code of ethics that we were talking about. Now, the code of ethics, once you're in the military, you learn this and you breathe it and you sleep with it, correct?
Yeah,
It has to be ingrained.
Definitely.
Because this is part of the discipline that goes through with the armed forces. Now, in the Senate, he leaves the army, he leaves the armed forces, but nevertheless, he takes the discipline with him. And he still acts like a military man. So is Senator Honasan, miski pa paano, military pa rin ang dating niyan eh.
Yeah.
Now, yung ganong klaseng instance, parang hindi ethical yun, ano? Correct me if I'm wrong. It doesn't follow your code of ethics, following your superiors. Maybe that's why General Reyes was also found it very sensitive. Obviously, he was hurt with that. And he couldn't do anything about it. Correct me if I'm wrong, yun ang basa ko lang eh. Let's go to the funeral.
Yeah.
Hero or plunderer, bakit? Why is he allowed to be in the cemetery of heroes?
He was
Your
given
point of view.
He was given a funeral honors because he was a soldier. He served the armed forces for more than 30 years, 37 years or 39 years. He was a former defense chief. He was a former chief of staff, and that is why he is. We gave to him the what is allowed.
So standard operating procedure,
And-
due him.
Drew him as a former soldier, and
But under
regardless of what
Investigation.
cause of death, And of course, yung investigation po wala pa rin investigation against General Reyes. It's still on the
Senate inquiry
a
pa
Senate
lang.
inquiry pa lang.
But the Senate inquiry is very bombastic. It's, I mean, you can't get worse than this inquiry. No less than how many million? 50 million plus 5 million every month. His wife traveling abroad with a certain Mrs. Ligot, diba, who says that her husband says he doesn't even know that they own houses. Believe nga ako, this is one general. He's a general, no? Si Ligot?
Yeah.
He's one general who seems to be mute to issues being, investigated. So, it's interesting. Ganun na, okay lang yun. It's okay to bury him there. How about Marcos? President Marcos?
Well, it's not within the level na po ng AFP to determine yung, syempre kay former President Marcos.
Ikaw, Rachel, civilian tayong dalawa, we can talk about
Yeah.
it. Kasi bakit si Marcos hindi pwede sa libingan ng biyani? Bakit si Reyes?
It all boils
no less
down to,
suicide. No less suicide.
Politicization, politics, yun lang eh. Kumbaga, dun iikot lahat eh, kung sinong nakaupo ngayon, gusto niya ba o hindi, yun lang.
Maganda sagot niyo, Major. One is that standard operating procedure, it's due him. Until you find him and convict him, he is still innocent. He still has his day in court. How about suicide? How is that looked upon by the military?
It's irregardless po on the cause of death for
Really?
a former, lalong-lalong
Is
kapag
it-
retired.
Is it honorable to shoot yourself?
Well, hindi po natin alam kung paano yung pagiging honorable pagka, di ba? It depends kung paano mo sinut yung sarili mo. Di ba?
Well,
What was
obviously, he
the
put the gun in his heart, but he wasn't wearing a uniform. There was no one attacking. If you're already I guess if you're in tirad pass, so to speak,
Yeah.
and the enemy is encroaching, and you are cornered in one side, rather than to give information to
Yeah.
the enemy, because you will be tortured, you will take your life. I think that's heroic. In this case, he was in front of his mother's grave. He was all alone. And there was no real pressure. Undue pressure was basically, like you said, inquiry. Is that heroic? No comment. I agree with you. I'm sorry, but I have to ask it. I hope you don't mind.
maganda naman
I
po
don't
yung
wish to
tanong.
be rude.
Yeah.
Pero maganda tanongin yan because ang taong bayan nagtatanong din dyan. Bakit naman kaya? Kasi his lawyer made a pun out of it. I don't know if he intended it. He shot himself in the heart kasi masakit daw ang puso niya. Not in the head wherein you try to take your life. But, the lawyer must be an idiot or something. But then again, he's making fool of the viewers.
Well, kung
and
tatanungin niyo po kami, again, ang masasabi namin, naging sundalo po siya. Siya po ay naging...
No doubt, a man of discipline. As you can, by the way he walks, the way he talks. And all the things that he's achieved. Di ba? So, hero at this point. Is that how he's perceived by the military right now? Hero pa rin ba siya sa AFP?
We gave him the funeral honors po.
Is there a perception within the military? You can't say, no?
Because depende po kasi sa yung pag sinabi mong hero eh. Di ba?
Ano po ang base ng mga militar? More or less lang. Just general perception. If you were to take 50-50, how many would vote na hero siya? How many would say wrong? With the suicide, not the anomalies still have to be proven. You're right.
Yeah.
I rest my case there. But the fact that he is the suicide, tingin mo base ng militar, tama yung ginawa niya?
Hindi pa ho tayo nakakapag-conduct ng... Or hindi pa natin nakakausap yung sundalo natin tungkol dyan po.
But it's not right, no, for a soldier to take his life in a situation unless it's deemed for heroism. Like what I said, if you're cornered and information will be extracted from you, the right thing to do is to take your life to protect the rest of the soldiers, the army, and the country.
Yeah.
But when there is no undue pressure of that type, and you take your life for convenience, so that there is no finger pointing. Basically, ganun lumalabas po. May nagsabi nga sa akin, maraming gripo sumara yung namatay siya. Tito Porras, no, of ANAD, I remember he told me that in the airport in Cebu. Maraming gripo sumara yung namatay siya. Hindi dapat.
Siyempre, meron ding mga sundalo na nagsasabi na
Nagtatanong
sana tinuloy na lang niya yung
Opo.
nagbigay siya ng statement niya. He said what he knows and para nalaman lang natin muna. Yung kung ano ba talaga nangyari noon.
Let's go back to your reforms. What exactly are being instituted now?
Well, since 2005 po.
Oo
ulitin
nga,
natin
yun lang
yung-
hindi alam ng tama maganda yan. Sabihin mo
Kaya
maganda
nga-
yan. Explica mo yan.
Kaya nga po inuulit-ulit namin na yung mga napapanood natin sa TV, lalong-lalo na sa Senate inquiry. General Rabusa retired years back. And yung time na kinukwento niya, that was before 2005. And the AFP has reformed itself.
202 nga yun eh.
And 202,
Yeah.
marami na pong pagbabago, including yung opisina niya dati na matagal na pong nabuwag yun dahil nga sa
Nabuwag na nga daw eh.
dahil dun sa nangyaring ang
Kay Carlos
General Garcia.
Carlos
Ay,
Garcia.
ni-reform natin yun. Tinanggal natin, hinati natin sa apat.
Hindi nyo na inantay mga
Hindi
investigasyon.
na. Kasi with the Feliciano Commission findings and recommendation,
Which
doon pala-
general instituted all these reforms?
General Abu.
Amo, in 205 pa yon.
Before.
Before pa?
Before pa.
So he's the hero. Pero he implemented it, he initiated it.
And nagtuloy-tuloy yun. For the
Since
next-
then, hindi na
hanggang
nawala.
ngayon. Hindi na siya nawala. To include all other utilization ng mga pondo, iba't iba, balikatang funds,
Yes.
yung United Nations
United
Reimbursement Fund
Nations,
na
that's still being discussed. Eh?
kaya pinag-uusapan na bakit daw, baka daw na-convert. And alam niyo kung titingnan niyo yung UNRF, yun lang talaga ang pondo na ginagamit ng AFP for deployment ng tropa.
Oh, yun lang.
Because-
Kasi the rest goes to wages and military
Yes, because
equipment.
ang binibigay lang sa amin ng General Appropriations Act is just 80 million per year. Out
Yes.
of the 80 million, almost 95% goes to sweldo ng tropa.
95%.
Sweldo ng
I read
soldier.
PS.
And yung 5.7 million lang,
92.7% to be exact.
yeah.
92.7.
And the rest goes to the maintenance ng Peacekeeping Operations Center. Now, how will you train the soldier? Siyempre, bago mo siya papadala sa ibang bansa, kailangan mo siyang i-train. Kailangan mong ipa-check up yung medical condition niya, bakuna, uniforme niya. Walang ibang pagkukunan po kundi yung UN Reimbursement Fund. And malaking misconception po na sinasabi na bakit binabawasan yung allowance ng sundalo. Ang gusto naming sabihin is that the cost of the individual soldier, which is $1,028 per month, was based on the Memorandum of Agreement between the UN and the government.
Right.
Silang nag-usap at hindi yung
They
UN
came to
to
that
the soldier.
figure. Yeah.
They came up with that figure. Sabi niya, okay, that's the price of the soldier.
So it's not the AFP that identified and appropriated that budget.
Not the AFP po, it's the UN. And
Okay.
sabi niya, it's $1,028 per month, pero gusto ko, ganito ang qualification niya. He knows how to do peacekeeping, he knows this and that, he will be able to sustain yung 6 month na,
So there's expense in
it's
training,
the expense,
the build up.
it's the expense of the
Yes.
soldier. And therefore, syempre, kukuha ka doon ng pang-train niya, yung para pang-bakuna niya, yung uniforme niya.
So
on and
again,
so forth.
misconstrued.
Alam ng sundalo natin yun. Alam ng sundalo.
Pero hindi alam ng publiko eh. Ang pagbasa
Yes, because,
namin, parang may nagbulsa
siguro-
na naman eh. Pumunta ng New York.
Siguro
Diba?
ang kung lang dahil allowance yung tawag eh.
Allowance,
Ang
mali
sabi
eh.
na, uy, allowance yun bakit binabawasan? No? It's, siguro ang pwede nating, kung papalitan natin pangalan, it's more of an incentive. It will be at the discretion of the AFP or the Philippine government as to paano siya ibibigay sa sundalo, kung gaano karaming bibigay.
Rachel, do you think it's fair enough that what we're hearing in the Senate, parang kulang ang explanation ng mga generals dun eh. Maybe, maybe they should have Major Ileto there, no? Para to explain. Parang nami-misconstrue ng publiko. Ako, I watch it, I listen to it, and I don't hear these points. It seems hindi nako-convey ng tama eh.
Siguro hindi lang masyadong
Correct.
nakukuha.
No? Baka dapat si si General Mabanta is the spokesperson. Di ba
Well,
dapat he should be the one there to explain it.
We've always been going around and talking to the public and syempre alam mo naman.
No, but in
depende.
the investigations itself, because really that's being as it goes along, no? And the way the senators are asking the questions and the way it's coming out, parang maling-mali ang AFP, walang nagawang tama eh, parang gano'n lumalabas eh.
Yun ang masakit eh. You know, I've been with the armed forces and I've seen them kung paano sila magtrabaho. Pero sa lahat ng mga investigations ngayon, talagang aggrieved party talaga ang armed forces. At ngayon ang problema nila, paano nila isasalba yung kanilang moral,
Image.
yung kanilang image. Kasi 24 hours nagtatrabaho ang sundalo natin compared to a civilian government employee na 8 hours lang nagtatrabaho. So, hindi nakikita nung tao yung, kumbaga, this is the paper, no? Ang nakikita lang nila, itong tuldok na to, ba't hindi nila nakikita lahat ng nagawa ng sundalo para sa case ni Trillanes, sir, kasi he's also a graduate of NCPAG. Actually, his papers is one of the star papers there, nasa library namin. Kay Senator Trillanes, when you conduct an investigation naman, be ethical naman as a public servant. No? You conduct investigation in a manner na, of course, hindi masyadong makakaapekto dun sa tao kasi inosente pa naman yung ini-interview mo. Wala pa siyang kasalanan. So,
Inquiry pa nga lang.
Inquiry pa nga lang eh. So, if that's an inquiry, dapat, hindi niya ganun dapat tratuhin yung kanyang mga, yung kanyang mga invited guests. Unless ayaw na nila magpapunta ng any other guest dun sa,
Pero
for that matter, di ba?
ganun pa man, makikita ninyo yung sundalo natin. He is still waiting and he'll be humbly waiting for... Okay lang sa kanya yun. Okay lang sa kanya na ganun nga nangyari. Dahil nga, we are a professional organization. Kami po yung sundalo ninyo and you're supreme to us, di ba? Sabi nga ng Constitution at nung unang araw pa lang namin bilang sundalo, tinaas namin yung kanang kamay namin. At sabi namin, kahit mamatay kami, yung buhay namin itataya namin just to protect the Constitution. At yun nga, nakasado sa Constitution, that the civilian is supreme to the military.
I wonder if General Reyes did the constitutional thing in taking Erap down. But then that's another show. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope in this program we are able to answer some of the intriguing questions that seem to be flying around. Now we're going to have to end it, but before we do, I'd like to give our guests and co-host an exit message to you. We have Major Enrico Gil Ileto from the Public Assistance Office. Sir, your message to our viewers.
Well, masasabi ko lang is that your armed forces have transformed a lot. Yung mga napapanood natin sa Senate inquiry. Although hindi naman natin sinasabi totally na na-eradicate na natin kung ano man yung mga lumalabas sa investigasyon, ay nagbago na po. We are a professional organization, we are for the people, and right now we are implementing yung internal peace and security plan bayanihan na kung saan ang konsepto natin is whole of nation approach. Magtutulong-tulungan po tayo dito. It's a bayanihan at kahit anong mangyari, your armed forces will be here and will continue to perform its mandated task to protect the Filipino people.
Thank you very much, Major. Rachel Ann Panaliki.
It's Panlaki, sir.
Mali ba pronunciation mo?
It's Panlaki.
Panlaki.
Yeah, okay.
Panlaki. Sorry, Rachel.
Kasi for me, nakikita ko na for every problem, there will always be an opportunity. Siguro hindi na-explain kanina masyado na sa armed forces, nagkaroon tayo ng organizational reforms, di ba? Meron tayong system reforms. That is why we have the Philippine Defense Reform Program, which is from the J1, which is the Office of the Deputy Chief of Staff or Personnel, hanggang J9. Meron silang mga different programs to correct the system. Also, we have the leadership. But I would just like to raise, no, how are you going to measure the effectiveness, the effectiveness of these reforms, no, that you were saying? Is these reforms implemented properly? Do you have an oversight? And is it effective? Kasi it's easy to say, okay, the armed forces is undergoing several reforms, organizational reforms, system reforms, but is it implemented in an efficient and effective manner? And the oversight, how is that? That needs to be addressed by the armed forces, I think.
Thank you very much. There you are, you have it, and we've done our best. It's great when we have great guests and resource people because it makes life easier for me. Plus, a lot of study obviously has gone into it, and that's exactly our role, to bring to you to help analyze issues that confront us on a daily basis. Like I always say, you are what you watch, you are what you read, and you are what you hear. Other than that, you are just a walking zombie. So, it's important, it's imperative you study all the different issues that come your way before you make your analysis and before you even come out into the streets. At least sa military, meron sila code of ethics. Do we? Maraming salamat po. My name is Tambuatco. We hope you've enjoyed our show. We'll be back again next week. That's Monday. We replay at 11. And on YouTube, you can catch it. Let's see. You put in GNN, Talk to Harry, that's one word on YouTube, and you can pick up the archives of all the other shows that come on. This specific show will come on sometime in 2-3 days after this program. Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rachel?
You are what you watch.